Thank you all for coming this evening. Not exactly a nice night out there. Per the terms of the charter, the Board of Finance holds this public hearing to present the proposed budget for fiscal 26. You'll hear, after brief comments from me, you'll hear the presentations from First Selectman Mark Fiorentino, and then from the Board of Ed Chair, Monica Logan. After that, I'll open it up for public comment and questions. We'll answer as best we can this evening. If there's anything we can't answer at this point, someone from one of the boards or administrations will get back to you. I chair the Board of Finance. My name is Michael Guarco. My vice chair is Kevin Hobson. The other members are Bill Kennedy, Ben Perrin, Jenny Emery, James Satsinos. We'll go to the next slide. In a nutshell, excluding the transfer last year within the budget for the emergency communication system from the general fund into the project fund, the budget change year to year from fiscal 25 to 26 is 3.24%. The change in the mill rate is 3.26%, which brings it from 33.13 to 34.21. I would note also on vehicles, that rate per state law is capped at 32.46 maximum. In the center column, this is the worksheet that we're working with. The municipal operating budget for the Board of Selectmen is $14,110,000 and change. Existing debt service is $1,731,000. The next line includes a contribution into the capital non-recurring fund, $105,000, and into the small cap fund, which deals with infrastructure, road work, overlay, vehicle replacement, etc., is $2.5 million. On the BOE side, the operating budget is $39,418. The request with the total $57,864,000. It's slightly less than that. These numbers are rounded to the nearest thousand. In terms of the revenue side, it's an increase in the total pool of taxes of 3.51%. Part of it through net growth in the grand list and part of it through adjusting the rate to the 34.21, which applies to real estate and business. They call it personal property, but it's business property and assets. And once again, the motor vehicle rate doesn't change. It's capped at the 32.46. The next line is the auto supplement, interest and liens. Those are additional taxes that come in, vehicles that weren't on October 1st but get registered during the year, and then back taxes that come in the interest and tax liens for those properties that are past due. And that totals the 740. The 7842 is mostly about $6.5 million of that is money directly from the state for education. A part of it is the education cost sharing grant. Part of it is the excess cost reimbursement for special education, high cost cases. They contribute a portion back after we pay out a certain amount. It also includes the tuitions that come from for students from Heartland, as well as reimbursement for special ed expenses for students from Hartford. It includes also, there's a bunch of small categories of money that come in from the state. The increase in the educational cost sharing grant this year was, I believe, $182,000, using the governor's budget as the reference point for fiscal 26. In terms of the excess cost grant, it's a drop year to year of, I think, 587,000, partially driven by change in caseload, mostly driven because they're supposed to reimburse us at 88% and of what they should give us in total, and instead they're projected at this point to be at 62% for next year. Local revenue shows an increase. The increase primarily is because of earnings on the reserves. The current rate at least has been around 5% or the high 4s. I suspect now that'll be changing given that the T-bill rate is coming down a bit, but we still feel comfortable at this point with what we have built in to that $1,042,000. In use of the general fund surplus, this current year, fiscal 25, we're using $2,185,000 from the general fund. The general fund, if you looked at the articles in the Drummer, essentially is the accumulation over time, the residual of what is budgeted, expenditures versus revenues. We always have to end up in the black, and those build up. So this draws, in the current year, fiscal 25, $2,185,000. We intended to reduce that draw a bit by $300,000 or so. Instead, given the difficult revenue picture, we decided to leave it at the same level, $2,185,000. That will still leave us with a reserve level of the target of 15%, which we look to hold, given that that's what the bonding credit rating agencies look for us to hold, that range, and we'd still be comfortably there. And as you see, revenues total the same amount as the expenditures, balanced budget. This is the calculation for the taxes based on the grand list. As we know it currently, it still is subject to any changes from the Board of Assessment Appeals, but those should be relatively minor and essentially won't change what we're looking at. And that's a total of $1.5 million more than the current year's budget, $46,056,383. Striking the balance. That really sums up the cumulative and collaborative efforts of the boards over the past few months in building the fiscal 26 budget proposal presented here tonight. Each year, we look to balance the varying perspectives in meeting the municipal and educational needs of our town with the cost and affordability of doing so. And it's not easy to do it. This year was particularly difficult given certain actions on the part of the state that negatively impact the revenue side of the budgetary equation, which are to a degree offset within this budget with more revenues from tuition and the special ed reimbursements from Heartland and Hartford respectively, by booking greater interest earned on the reserves, as mentioned, and maintaining rather than reducing the same draw on the general fund reserves as in the current fiscal year. We believe the proposed budget for next year is both reasoned and reasonable, being both contemplative of the needs yet sensitive to the taxpayers of Granby. We trust that you will concur and favor it with your approval 2 weeks out. Next steps will be the presentations from first the Board of Selectmen, municipal side, the first selectman, Mark Fiorentino, then presentation, the education budget proposal by the board chair, Monica Logan. And then after that, I'll open it up for questions and comment from the public. Subsequent to that, I'll close the hearing. The Board of Finance will consider what it's heard and not heard tonight, and we'll decide what to be sent forward to the machine vote 2 weeks from today, either as is or changed as we deem appropriate. Thank you. Mark?
All right, thank you, Mike. Same caveat for me as every year. I'm not very technically savvy, so I am going to try to. What button do I push to get the red dot? I'm asking you, Mike. Is this the red dot?
Red. This should be the red dot. This moves it.
All right. Oh yeah. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This may be a little bit longer than I usually do or like to do, and I want to explain why and start there. We are going to go through, as we always do, and highlight the big picture stuff in our budget, but we are going to spend a few minutes sort of highlighting how we got here and some of the strategic initiatives we are working on and some of the work we did to get here. Because it really is true when you hear us say that the fiscal process and the budgeting process for us never ends. That is true. We are working on it constantly, and we don't get too many opportunities like this for those who are in the room and those who might watch it later to sort of give you a summary of what we have been doing throughout the year. So we'll start very briefly on the first slide. There's my colleagues on the Board of Selectmen are all here. Thank you all for being here and the work you do throughout the year. You guys in the audience know who they are. You may not know I hope you know our town manager, Mike Walsh, our director of finance, Kimmy. You have to raise your hand, Kimmy, whether you want to or not. Thank you, Kimmy. And our administrative project manager, Betsy. Betsy, raise your hand. All right. So those three individuals are primarily responsible for getting this work to you tonight, and they deserve a lot of credit and thanks for getting us here. But I also want to take the opportunity to thank our entire team in the municipal government team for a couple of reasons. First, every year, they work their butts off for they work their butts off for the whole year, every day. But to get this budget ready for you and the public to consider and vote on is a tremendous amount of work every year. This year it was even more work because if you've been following the process, you'll know that we switched our system and the formatting and the way we present the budget. So everybody on the team had to learn a new process for reporting their budgets and making their requests and working together to get it in the format that's ready for you. But I also want to thank them, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this in a minute, because without that entire team working together to help us form a foundation, we could not have made some of the structural changes that we were able to make in the municipal side of our government over the last couple of years, year plus to 2 years. Without those structural changes, we could not have presented this budget to you tonight in the format with the priorities that we are. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but it really took everybody on the team being willing to do more, to take on more responsibility, and to work together to make some structural changes to get us here. So I'm going to try now to go to the... All right. So we actually, on the Board of Selectmen, adopt separate budget goals to govern our thought process and our work on putting the budget together. We look at them every couple of years. I think they haven't changed in the last 2 years. I'm not going to go through these in any detail. You can read them for yourself, but I am going to put so a little more color to them on at least a few of them. So the first one I'm going to start with is our second goal, to explore alternative methods of providing services and ways to expand revenue sources to minimize property tax increases. So we've done a number of things here throughout the last couple of years, and I just want to highlight some of them for you. We have really taken a strategic look. There's more work to do. There's always more work to do, let me say that, in every single aspect of what we're doing. But we've taken a very strategic look at our grant funding process. And again, you'll see some talk about this in our reorganization and how we're assigning that work. But over the last couple of years in particular, we have worked hard to sort of consolidate that work and be more strategic about it. So we are very active in seeking federal, state, and other specialty grants. This is a very rough number, so don't ask me to try to point to a slide that shows it exactly, but in the last 2 years or so, we've probably roughly $10 million or more in funding, and we use those to try to help us pay for our capital needs, but we also use them to help offset our operating costs where it makes sense. We don't go out and seek grants to create new programming for which we don't have a source to pay for, but we are very active in seeking grants for things that services we're already providing. So just a few quick examples. The emergency communication project for our first responders, we secured a $2 million state grant to help us pay for that. We're using ARPA funds to do a complete IT modernization plan throughout all of Town Hall. You've heard me talk about that. I won't detail it, but the short version is we replaced or upgraded just about everything in our IT system, and it was time to do it. Chief Samson has gone out and achieved or obtained grants to help us with speed enforcement. Of course, we built the Salmon Brook walking path with a steep grant. Every year we use federal and state grant funding to help with our bridges and our roadway maintenance and repairs. This year we went out and got a specific grant to replace IT equipment in our library, computers and other equipment. And we did a significant amount of senior center renovations in the kitchen and other renovations, all through grant funding. So that's just a highlight on when we talk about exploring other revenue sources and being strategic, what we're doing. I do want to spend a minute on the next one too, which our goal was to explore methods for creating efficiency and reducing costs. Again, this work never ends, but with Mike's help and guidance, we've been able to actually bring some of those goals that we set a while back to fruition in the last year plus. The first is, and you'll hear me talk in a little more detail about this, we did a reorganization of our town staff. The short version is we reorganized the Public Works Department and the Parks and Rec Department primarily, eliminated 2 positions, but we've also done some restructuring in Town Hall and reassigned some duties, asked people to do more, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. We also have spent some ARPA dollars and other grant funding on other ongoing efficiency measures. They are mostly around IT and software upgrades. So just again, by way of example, in the last year and a half or so, we are in some stage of installing and implementing a timekeeping and payroll automation system, an automation system to help us with our accounts payable, an automation system that helps us with our property assessment when we go out and have to do reassessments, and an automation system around our building permit processing and inspection system. I can't point to you any immediate dollars that those save, but over time they will create savings for us both in costs, we hope, but in efficiency. So, instead of people literally hand inputting time cards, that system is being operated so the same people can do more strategic and more work. One of the other major things that we are able to do as a cost-saving measure that we could not have done without our entire team and our collectively bargained agreements with our workers is we converted all of our health insurance plans to high deductible plans. Achieved some small savings initially, but again, over time, we hope that they will be more significant. Number 4, I'm not going to read it, talks about our capital planning and long-term capital needs. Again, over the last couple of years, we have worked hard at this. There's more work to do, but by way of example, the idea is to look more comprehensively and more strategically at our plan. The 2 biggest things that we have focused on in the last year is to look further out on our plan. So we now have a true 10-year rolling capital plan that we're going to be finalizing in the next couple months. And we've done a tremendous amount of coordination with the Board of Education so that we can present to the voters one capital plan with all of the town's needs on one plan. Quickly on number 6, develop a multi-year plan to maintain unassigned balance and reserves at 15%. We say this every year. This is a tough one. This is something we struggle with every year. We have set a goal. So when you wonder why are we trying to get the reserves to stay at 15%, it's because we've thought about it strategically. There's a lot of reasons to do that. I personally think it's now more prudent than ever, given the relative uncertainty that we are facing going forward with both federal and state funding. You guys are following the news as much as we are, so there is significant risk that we may lose some portion of that funding. And so keeping a reserve that helps us transition out of those losses is good financial policy, and that's why we do it. The final goal was to continually strive to improve and fund communication strategies for residences and businesses. We've done a tremendous job here. I hope you guys will, if we don't agree on anything else, I hope everybody can agree that we have made a lot of effort to try to make information easier to obtain by residents and make it easier for you to communicate with us. So again, in the last year, just the 2 biggest examples is we continue to upgrade the communication system in the town hall meeting room. So we improved the microphones and the camera system in there. And we just recently installed a new system in the senior center, the biggest room in the senior center, because what we found is we're having so many meetings and we're covering so many of them and recording them so that the information is available, that there were times where there were conflict and we had to meet in the senior center. It wasn't equipped to do Zoom calls, and it wasn't very well equipped to record the meetings and be able to post them. So you will see in this budget a continued investment in virtually all, I think I could say this accurately, the initial cost to make those improvements were through grant funding, either ARPA, COVID funding, or other sources. But the operating costs going forward are included in this budget. All right, next slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. You've heard us say, probably heard others say, honestly, the way we manage our town is relatively unique, and we are the sort of the envy of a lot of towns across the state. We budget very conservatively on the revenue side, and we try to have enough in our rainy day funds and those kind of things. The one thing I did want to point out to you is this line here, our grand list growth, which has, it's been more in the last few years than it was previously. You guys have all seen the projects that delivered to that, but so this would what we would have seen in revenue growth, but for the state underfunding and unfunding certain programs, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So that number there is roughly cut in half by state actions over the last year. So this slide details that a little bit. So I'll point out a couple of things. This year, the state changed the way we can assess motor vehicles. If we had not taken action at the Board of Selectmen to take a local opt-out, that would have cost us more than $500,000 in revenue. Now just for a second, stop and think. That one number alone is 1/10 of a percentage point on the increase in our budget, right? So just by the state taking action, we started with just with that one component, a $500,000 hole in our budget. But the state didn't end there. So you go, they also required a exemption, property tax exemption for certain disabled veterans. Good idea, well worth supporting, but they didn't fund it. You're funding it, because that cost is roughly another $155,000 for us to be able to provide that exemption and that benefit to our veterans. And then this last line, you hear this every year, but the state has never, and Monica is probably going to talk more about this, has never funded the educational funding at the levels they promised. Never. Okay? And every year at the start of the fiscal year, roughly, they tell us at least, we're still not going to fund you at the level we promised, but they give us a level to plan on, and then they cut from there. So I think you're going to have the details of where we started on educational funding and where we ended up. But just put those numbers together, and it should equal roughly $600,000. So right off the bat, before we do anything, before we pay our contractual obligations, before we have to start dealing with inflation, we start with a $600,000 hole that the state of Connecticut handed us. So the next few slides, I won't go into detail, but I'll leave them up long enough for you to read them in case you'll have questions. But they detail what I talked about in terms of our reorganization. And this is just the beginning. We understand that this is an ongoing process. If we're doing it right, we have to constantly be looking for these kind of opportunities. But these changes were systematic and structural enough that they required everybody being willing to do it. So just a couple of things that I want to point out here. So we really do, whether you believe it or not, start with a zero sum. And on the municipal side, we start with what is the base, and is there anything we can do to cut the base? And in this case, what we did was this kind of highlights the structural changes we made in Park and Rec and Public Works. We made changes in the Finance Department, which hasn't resulted in elimination of positions, but it has resulted in people taking on more work and more responsibility. And the same thing in the manager's office. This is the one I talked about a little bit earlier, assigning one person specifically to helping us do the grants management is beginning to pay dividends, and I think we'll see that continue to grow as we go on. What all this results in is a flattening out of the organization. The two positions we eliminated were very high management positions. They resulted in some immediate savings. And they have given us some long-term capacity building opportunities. This goes in a little bit more detail in the Public Works. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, except that there were 2 notes that I wanted to make. The first is, and I've heard these questions or comments during our public workshop process and in the Board of Finance's work to get us to this point. People talking about how in the last few years in the private sector in particular, companies, your companies, whether you own them or working for them, had to go through a process where they were combining jobs, and people were asked to do the work of what used to be 3 jobs. You got one person now doing 3 jobs. And that's how the private sector is getting through it, by challenging and rewarding people for doing more. And that's exactly what we did here in both the Public Works and the Park and Rec Department. The other point I wanted to make here is you probably can't see the names up there, but the first few levels show the actual names of the people in charge. And I wanted to almost hit my fist on the table. Every single person who's named on that chart is doing more today and has more responsibilities under their job description than they did before the reorganization. That's the only way we could get there, was people's willing to do it. And that's why when you heard me say we're grateful for it, what I was talking about. This similar chart for community services, and so the Park and Rec Department was rolled into our Community Service Department. Same thing, a flattening out of the organization, absolutely the same thing. Every person on that chart who is named, if you know them or work with them or see them at the grocery store, thank them, because every one of them is doing more than they did this time last year. All right, a couple numbers that I wanted to highlight here. You're going to hear me talk a little bit more about this in a minute. So this is our operating budget increase, about 2.4%, plus or minus $330,000. Somewhere between 50 and half and 2/3 of that is in a new police officer for our force. We need to do it. It's time to do it. We haven't added an officer to our police force in decades, and because of the times we live in and the work that we're asking them to do, Chief Samson is in the back. I hope every time you see him, you thank him and you recognize the work that he and his team do. I say it at every public meeting that I get a chance, because I truly mean it. When we hired the chief, we asked him to look at police work a little differently than we have done in the past in our town, or at least the most recent history. And he and his team do everything we ask them to do and more. And it's time to get them enough officers to be able to do that. We're overworking them because they're doing everything we're asking them to do and more, but they're doing it because they're working a lot of overtime and extra hours to do it. So again, when you wonder how did we get to this number right here, remember we started with a $600,000 hole. Of course, we have contractual increases in other inflationary things. That number would have been significantly higher, obviously, if we hadn't been able to make the structural changes. And again, somewhere between half and 2/3 of that is in the new officer. So if you're asking yourself, why would I vote for this budget on the municipal side, I'm going to suggest to you that that's the reason why you should do it. They've earned it. All right, I lost it. I'm trying to get it to the next slide. There it is. So just a couple numbers here. This number is mostly made up with contractual obligations. To our employees is the biggest part of it, but also for fuel and those kind of things. I'm going to talk about this number a little bit more later. So you see, again, this is the increase column. This is our increase on our contractual obligations. You can see where we made some savings in benefits, and we have some savings because we paid off some of our debt. But this number here, we're increasing in the capital funding, because if you ask me what are the two themes of this budget, there's really only one theme, but most of it the theme is public safety. It's a theme we've been carrying forward over the last couple of budget cycles. Remember, last cycle, the voters supported the funding of the radio communication system. We're asking you for a new patrol officer. And this number here, roughly half of it, a little less than $100,000, is a capital contribution to a Granby ambulance, a new ambulance for the Granby ambulance service. I got nothing to say about this one. You can take the time to read it. It's a little bit more detail on everything that I said earlier. One other thing on this slide, this next one real quick, I talked about it. So here's the Granby ambulance number. Inside this number, I'm just going to give you examples. So that's the increase in capital funding is primarily between these two lines. So in this line, we are primarily addressing some needs at the Park and Rec in Salmon Brook Park, mostly around noise abatement and pickleball playing and stuff like that. But there's also a significant investment in some storage. One of the things we've struggled with over the last few years is everybody from the school to the public works to the Park and Rec to the library board is having, we don't have any storage facilities. So you'll see some modular buildings in that particular number. But it also includes some smaller things. It's a couple of new body cameras for the police officers and those kind of things. We can provide you those details if you need them. This kind of puts it all in perspective if you want to look back at our history and try to measure this is one way to measure the performance of how we're doing related to inflation. So this column here represents the change in the mill rate as compared to the change in inflation. And this column shows the change in the operating budget as opposed to the change in inflation caused by inflation. A couple of points here. So if you look at roughly the last decade, whether you compare our mill rate increases or our operating increases, cumulatively, we are significantly below what the inflation rate has been for that same period of time. That sounds really cool, but let me repeat again what that means so you understand it. It is evidence that when I tell you we start by looking at the base every year, and every year we have to cut something to get to where we want to be, this is the proof of it. If we can produce operating budget increases below the rate of inflation and tax increases below the rate of inflation, by definition, we are cutting to get there, or at least part of the way there. The other thing that I wanted to point out here to you is, so up until the last couple of years, you would see us being below the rate of inflation, substantially below in both categories. And the last couple of years, we've been above that. So over a 10-year period, substantially below it cumulatively, but the last couple of years. And just to highlight, everybody knows this, and the voters have been supporting this through their votes on the budget. That's really for two primary reasons. We are carrying out our commitment to increasing our capital planning and funding and our public safety. That's where those numbers are. This year's budget, as I pointed out to you, the vast majority of the increase is related to an increase in the adding an additional officer. Last year, the budget reflected a use of the general fund reserves to do the emergency communication system. This year, you saw the contribution to the Granby Ambulance Association. So that's how we got where we are. This is a summary of everything I just told you. I always try to end here. Everybody who's heard me speak before has heard me preach about this. If you are not signed up for getting notifications from the town, please sign up. It's easy. We've invested a lot of time and money and energy using that system to push out information and to gather information back. If you just go to the website and click subscribe and follow the instructions, you can sign up for notifications as often as you want to get them and in whatever format you prefer to get them in. Did I miss anything?
You not.
Board of Selectmen, did I miss anything? All right, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for your attention and your consideration.
Thank you, Mark. Monica, floor is yours.
I'm getting used to remembering that I'm short and I have to adjust the mic, so I'm proud of myself for recalling that. All right. First of all, my name is Monica Logan. I'm the chair of the Board of Education. I would want to mention we have several members of the Board of Education here with us tonight. We have Heather Lombardo, who's the vice chairperson, Liz Harmon Barlow, Donna Noland, Karen Richmond Goddard, and Dave Pelling and Ali Zafar are also serving on the board. Without all of their efforts and their collaboration and hard work, this job would be 1,000 times harder. So I'm extremely grateful for the members of our board. In addition, we have Superintendent Sherry Burke and our Finance Director, Nikki Stevenson. And as we go through this process, I'm going to highlight some of the creative thinking that has allowed us to get the budget to where it is. And I am infinitely grateful for all of their hard work, their time spent answering the hundreds of questions we pose at them, and for the hours that they give to our community in order to serve us as well as they possibly can. So thank you. We are committed to building a sustainable future by balancing financial responsibility with the needs of our students and staff. We are streamlining operations, strengthening in-district mental health and special education services, and fostering a positive environment for all. There are a lot of different goals that we had here in setting this budget. Primarily, we had to analyze and target instruction for post-COVID achievement, develop special education programs in the district as an opportunity to save costs in the future. Design aligned schedules between the high school and the middle school. As of right now, the high school and the middle school are on different time frames. If we arrange the schedule so they're on the same time frame, there's an opportunity for us to provide better educational opportunities with the cost savings potentially. We're also studying our transportation and busing plan, an opportunity to save costs in the future, and evaluating our technology device purchases and use. As I go through some of the highlights of this year's budget, Granby's PPE, or per pupil expenditure, of $20,725 is lower than DIRG C average of $22,836 and DIRG B average of $21,276. DIRG C is where Granby is currently placed. It's our district resource group, and we used to be in DIRG B, which is why we provide both. So DIRG C, it will be listed on a future slide, but DIRG B is often who we compare ourselves to. We think of Simsbury, we think of Farmington, and that would be DIRG B, but because of our demographics, we are actually in DIRG C. Some of the other highlights in this budget include the impact of 3 union contracts that have been negotiated higher salaries. Inflation and the cost of living continues to rise, as we are all very familiar with. This budget includes the addition of a school resource officer program. And I know several of you follow what goes on in our schools, and you're aware that there were circumstances where there were lockdowns, or there were a swatting incident where the school went into lockdown, the police had to come. A survey was presented to the entire community, an opportunity to see whether a school resource officer would be of benefit to our students and our staff. And we received a fantastic return on that survey. Approximately over 700 people responded, and 80% were strongly in favor of the SRO. So this budget, it was a goal of ours to include the school resource officer program. I do want to emphasize too, and I've said this at prior meetings, one of the things that was really important to us in this consideration was that the SRO officer was important to our students as well. The student body felt better with the potential of having an SRO present. The budget maintains all programs and student services at the current level. And we want to emphasize that Granby students' proficiency on the SAT, which is in the high school, ranks third in our DIRG for ELA and fourth for math. We're seeing our highest scores yet on ELA with 83% of our students at proficiency. All right, this is the per pupil expenditure that I was talking about in regard to our DIRG. You can see Granby is highlighted. I know you probably can't read that entire list, but Granby is a little bit toward the bottom there with 20,725, which is lower than the DIRG C average of 22,836. This slide we included based upon our discussion at the previous meeting, so everybody could see where Granby lands in our DIRG as opposed to our SAT score versus cost spent per pupil. As you can see, we spend right about the same as others, but we are scoring significantly higher. There are only two other areas that score above us in the SATs. That's two regional schools, Region 9 and Region 18. Region 9 includes Easton and Reading, and Region 18 includes Lyme and Old Lyme. You can see that there are other districts that spend quite a bit more than us and score quite a bit less. The total FY26 BOE budget request, as stated before, was $41,402,379. That includes $39,418,142 for our operating budget request at 3.41%. Our Q&D fund at $984,237, and our small cap fund, which in usual years is $1.05 million, but that has been reduced strategically, as I'll discuss in a further slide, to $1 million. The FY26 increase is 1.299621, which is 3.41%. Here you can see the budget breakdown, and the question that we get commonly asked is, where does all that money go? And as you can see here in the blue, 57.15% of that is for employee salaries and wages. That orange section is personnel for employee benefits, which is 16.87%. So approximately 72% of our budget is going to the salaries and the benefits of our personnel, the people who are actually teaching our children. Purchase services, contracts, et cetera, is at 10.09%, and the rest of the pie chart, you see it gets smaller and smaller in regard to tuition, maintenance, utilities, supplies, books and software, and activities and PD dues. Professional development, sorry. All right, the next slide reflects the creative thinking and the collaboration between Superintendent Burke, Nikki Stevenson, and our Board of Finance. We were able to try to think of different ways. Our original ask was 5.67%, and we were able to get it down to 3.41 by changing around how we were going to utilize some of the funds that we knew we had. So for Q&D, technical equipment, small cap, we had $120,000, and we added the SRO salary of $89,015. And then we shifted the funding over to. Is that right? We shifted it over to small cap, where we reduced the district and teacher laptops, or we're postponing basically getting our teachers new laptops and new additional equipment. And that was $174,000 savings through that postponement. We added technical equipment from Q&D, and then we reduced the HVAC testing. And just to clarify, the HVAC testing is sort of a mandate from the state law in regard to us performing air quality tests for our students. We were able to reduce that as well. From the general fund, we reduced the SRO salary. We reduced special ed purchase services. We were able to find a grant. Thank you again, Nikki Stevenson, for finding an additional $47,000 there. We reduced technical software, and we reduced custodial supplies. In our prior budgets, we thought we might have to eliminate a library media specialist. However, we were able to add that back in through this creative switching between the different funds. The highlights to achieve 3.41%. Like I said before, the collaboration with the Board of Finance to repurpose small cap and Q&D funds to support our district needs for the SRO and critical positions such as the library media specialists. We delayed the start date of the SRO to September 1st. Usually in the budget it would reflect July 1st, but since school doesn't start until right around September 1st, we were able to put off that start date, which saves 2 months of salary. Again, Nikki Stevenson was able to renegotiate an previously negotiated busing contract and obtain substantial savings through that negotiation. As I stated, we reduced software and supplies across the district. We postponed the replacement of district laptop purchases for staff. We modified available grant funding to offset operating budget expenses. We worked with vendors to reduce state-mandated HVAC assessments, and we also have someone on staff who's able to help us with some of that work that would otherwise have to be contracted out. And we did assume reductions in force due to enrollment. One of the goals of the superintendent and the Board of Education is any sort of reductions in force we try to do through attrition and retirement. So we hear a lot of discussions in regard to our enrollment going down, and while enrollment is going down, for the past 5 years it's been fairly flat. What we've been able to do is pay attention to the differences in the various grade levels. So go up 1 here, up 2 there, up 3 there, up or down 4 there. So it's not just one grade that can be eliminated. We have to pay attention to what's going on throughout every grade throughout the district. And by doing this, we're able to modify reductions in force in accordance with attrition. For our capital funding expenditure, which I mentioned before is usually $1.05 million, it is $1 million this year. The transportation and equipment includes $117,431. This is no new purchases whatsoever. This is only existing lease payments. Building and maintenance projects, which include HVAC, air quality, oil tank conversion, and the Wells Road buttress wall. There's some work that needs to be performed at Wells Road that's really a little bit overdue. There's some, if you walk around the building, you can see portions of the side are starting to fall off. Some of the tiles are missing and gone. If it isn't replaced soon, it could provide an opportunity for mold and water damage, which we would prefer to avoid. Technology also includes only existing lease payments, replacement, and repairs of $306,471, totaling the $1 million for capital funding. The Q&D fund, as I mentioned before, we were using a portion of the Q&D fund for the school resource officer salary. The total amount there, $984 plus. We also use that same fund for magnet and vocational school tuition, staffing such as social workers, math interventionists, tutors, and summer school programs, things like enrichment, credit recovery, AP Power Boost, programs that are really great and helpful and benefit our kids in a variety of ways. The K-3 reading program for year 1. This is another state mandate where we had to change our reading curriculum. Through the work of our Assistant Superintendent, Jen Parsons, we were able to pilot a fantastic program and receive substantial savings on that program. It ended up being much less than we anticipated it being last year. And that is included in the Q&D fund request as well as student enrichment and clubs. All right, that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So, next order of business is we take questions and comment from the public. There's 2 mics set up front. I would ask that those who wish to come up, please do, and identify yourself, name and address so we know who we're listening to. And we'll allow 3 minutes for each individual to say what they'd like to say. And with that, I'll open it up. Herb?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Herb Hulbert. Carol and I live at Hungary Road for about 10 years. I have two questions. One for Monica, please. Could you explain, not in maybe just a summary, of what the school resource officer actually does?
Is working? Okay. Thank you. No, thank you for the question. The school resource officer is going to be an individual, and mind you, this program was developed with Chief Sansom and Superintendent Burke, and an opportunity to find what best serves our students. The SRO is a police officer who is present. The officer would not be wearing their full uniform, instead dressed in more khakis and a formal shirt. They would provide security to our students. They act as a resource for the students when students need additional assistance. They do not act as disciplinarians for the school. They're there as an officer of the law to provide additional security to our kids in the event emergency services are necessary. In addition, I think one of the things I found in the whole process of developing the SRO is that the SRO acts as someone who knows the kids and can develop a relationship, particularly with kids who need someone to develop a relationship with. And that's an opportunity for an SRO to prevent additional security concerns from arising just through that, being that presence throughout the school.
Okay, thank you. Second question is for you, Mark. And looking at your number 2 and number 3 goals up there, I applaud those. It's trying to find alternative ways to save money and whatever you can. And are we still servicing debt on the East Street property?
Well, yes, the answer to that is yes, right, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We are. Has there been any thought of putting that on the market and getting rid of that?
We have not had any detailed discussions about that in the last several years that I'm aware of. What we did do, and you may or may not know this, so there's actually some policies in our plan and conservation development that are directly on point related to the East Street property about maintaining it in agricultural use, at least for the near future. So we've done that. We put those properties out to bid and are keeping it active in agricultural use. We have not had any discussions about divesting ourselves of that property. We have worked on divesting ourselves of the Fresh East property, and as many of you know, we're working with a developer to potentially redevelop current school as some senior housing, but the East Street property has not been on that list in the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Nice job, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Mike Komarenko, Notch Road. Been a long-time Granby resident. I was unaware that we were hiring a new police officer in town. I was just wondering if there's any way, instead of getting an SRO, because all the incidences we've had this year have been swatting, have been fake reports, and our police department has done very well at attending to these issues of putting off the SRO and having the officer we hire spend a little more time at the schools.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mike. We actually talked about that significantly as we developed these different programs. I think the collective wisdom is that's ultimately not a good use of resources, because for the SRO officer to be effective, you want them in the schools all of the time. It's not really an efficient way to pull them out when you need patrol work done and vice versa. What you're describing actually already currently happens. Our officers are regularly in the schools, not just when there's an incident, but they go by regularly just to be present and visit, and it's part of the reason that their resources are getting stretched too thin. So in the collective wisdom, I'm not going to talk about the collective wisdom. I'm going to talk about myself. I think that that's the correct question to put in front of the voters, me personally. I believe in the SRO position. I think it can make significant improvements in the culture in our schools and not so much the safety, but in giving the kids and the parents a resource. And to get the value out of that, you can't just pull a cop off the street and put him in there part-time. That's why we presenting it the way we are to the public for your consideration, from my standpoint.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I understand the police officers already do go to the school. And at the last Board of Education meeting, I brought up certain ways to help offset the cost of the SRO if we do decide to go that route. My next question is, I just have some other ways of saving with the schools as far as getting away from the paper trays we're spending. Looks like $100 a day. Just stuff like that. I think we can cut spending with the schools and fuel and other stuff. I just also think we should look at alternative ways of offsetting some of our property taxes, the home taxes and stuff. So, thank you.
Next. Mahoney, I haven't heard from you in a couple of years. Thank you for coming.
And we have someone online?
Well, we'll do who's in the room first.
Okay.
If you wish, John, you're welcome to.
You asked for this, Mike.
Well, it's too quiet, John.
John Mahoney, 16 Mahoney Drive of Guarco, Connecticut. If we're going to be arbitrary, I'd like to get some benefit. My compliments to your work. Mark, sometimes right person in the right place comes along. And I mean this very sincerely, that I am very happy. And I applaud your efforts on our behalf with the Siting Council. I think it is a battle well worth your time and effort, and thank you. Everyone else, thank you very much for your efforts. So my first question, Mark, you're a lawyer.
Yeah, don't hold that against me.
On TV, you're never supposed to ask a question if you're a lawyer in a courtroom if you don't already know the question, or know the answer. Is that true?
That is certainly what they teach you, yes.
So sometimes you might ask it rhetorically, even though you know the answer, and it might not help you.
Yes? No.
Do you read the drummer? It's worse.
I'm sorry?
Do you, I know you write for the drummer. Do you read the drummer?
I try to, yep.
So do I. Sometimes, in my household, we both read the drummer. Sometimes we write emails about money on trees. Sometimes we read the drummer. Sage of Granby, putting together a long-term plan, talking about stability, the need for stability, I think is what you wrote about in the fall, Michael, and how a return to stability allows municipalities such as ours to better plan. Am I recalling that correctly?
Essentially, correct.
So, Michael, given what's going on, did you vote for Mrs. Harris?
I'm going to advise you as your lawyer, you do not have to answer that question. It's rhetorical.
Anyway,
I'm not going to plead the fifth, I'll tell you that.
how did we go from DRGB to DRGC?
I'll take a stab before asking Superintendent Burke to step in, but it's based upon demographics, including poverty level,
Economic status.
economic status, poverty level, population. It's in the full list of the demographics is in the budget book, and I don't remember them entirely, but Superintendent Burke, do you recall all of them?
It's outlined in the budget book on page 5. It's a formula that we do not own. The formula
I
is the
understand. But how did
educational.
we drop?
It's all about population and demographics. It's not about our scores or how the quality of the school.
How did we go from B to C?
Other populations increased and ours decreased. And based upon the income level and the other demographics for the formula, which I can find the page, but I don't recall. I'm sorry?
It's on page 5.
Page 5.
I'll look at that.
Okay, but it has nothing to do with the quality of the school. It has everything to do with the demographics of the area we're in.
No comment. I'm going to leave that there. I'd like to go back to the gentleman who asked a question a moment ago about the SRO. I'm hearing that we're adding 2 police officers, not 1. I understand the difference. I heard the commentary. But you're telling me we already have 1 police officer, and I have no complaints about the police in town. They do a great job. I think it's a safe town. Obviously, it's, very happy to be here. But we're essentially adding 2 police officers. We're going to call one an SRO, and we're going to call the other one a police officer. Why?
I'll start, and the first answer is yes, they will both be certified police officers. With respect to the SRO program, that's not the only model out there, but the wisdom is if we're going to do an SRO program, collectively that's the model we should consider and put in front of the taxpayers this year. Monica may have a better answer or a more complete answer than I do, but I'm going to just try to repeat what I said before, that even though they're both certified police officers, they are playing 2 entirely different roles. You will not see, absent some complete emergency, the SRO officer doing patrol work or the other things that our officers do, and you won't see the officer that you hire in the town side in the school serving as a SRO officer. It's a more expensive model than other models out there, but the collective wisdom, including of our chief who's operated these SRO programs and who has actually helped design the state law around them, that's the model that is traditionally most effective, even though it's more expensive than other models we could have utilized, for sure.
The SRO has to undergo additional training that regular police officers do not. Essentially, this is someone who has to go through all the same training that our teachers have to go through in how to facilitate discussions with children. In addition, this program was specifically designed with our police on what would best serve Granby, considering the frequency with which they were attending our schools and addressing issues that were going on. It seemed like the best model to have someone there. Also, it looks like Superintendent Burke wants to say something, but in working conjunction with Chief Sansom, who's worked extensively in developing SRO programs and has really built the model, this was the one that we felt was the best fit for Granby. Also, it's an opportunity by having an officer present in all 4 schools, not only to build relationships, but to maybe prevent issues from developing, as opposed to waiting for a police officer to come after the issue has already happened. Superintendent Burke.
If you'd like.
Please.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear so many questions about the school resource officer. We do have extensive information on our website, and we spent 3 board meetings presenting this concept. And so we have been working in collaboration with the Board of Finance, the town council members. Every single person has had a voice in this process. You are correct. It is 2 law enforcement officers, and they are very much needed by the town of Granby. We have town of Granby police officers in our schools almost daily, which depletes the force here in town. And then that means that we have different officers every day, oftentimes dealing with the same students or the same challenges. And so what we've learned through our research is that the opportunity to develop relationships and preventative strategies, we need to do home visits, we need to do safety plans. Those types of things do require an expert eye as a part of our crisis intervention team. And so a school resource officer is an essential role for that in the school district. As Mark shared, collectively we felt absolutely the police department needs at least one additional patrol officer, and that it was time for Granby to join almost every other community in the state of Connecticut and employ a school resource officer as well. It's also important to note that the school resource officer program is fully grant funded. So the percentage increase of our budget is not, you are not voting yes or no to a school resource officer program. The 3.41 was realized because of some creative problem solving and collaboration across the boards, using our small cap allocation and flattening that to $1 million in order to offset the other buckets of funding, which is small capital, Q&D, and the operational budget itself. So the school resource officer in this first year is fully funded, and as we've done with other positions historically, that position will be slowly moved into the operating budget as we're able to realize additional savings as that enrollment dips through attrition. If I may also answer the DIRG question. So DIRG has been around for decades and decades. It was first developed by the State Department of Education. They have not updated the DIRG allocation in many years. The page 5 of the budget book does explain that the classification was just recreated by the School and State Finance Project. So this is not something that Granby calculates. The state stopped doing it, and superintendents and boards of ed look to this data to help us compare. Are we on trend with our spending? Are we on trend with our test scores? What is our return on investment? And so these were redesigned in 2006. I know that we're talking about schools, and so that A, B, C sounds like a ranking, but it is absolutely not. Going from DIRG C to DIRG B simply means that we've changed. The demographics in the town of Granby do continue to change. We have more students on free and reduced lunch, and that is one of the primary indicators for the DIRG, as well as our income, education of the parents, and other factors that are all listed. So I just want to be clear that we didn't go from a B to a C. We simply switched categories, and that's how it's delineated. Thank you.
I do have another question.
Okay.
And I already know the answer. But as someone who drives up and down 189 and 102, sorry, as someone who drives up and down Route 10 and 189 at regular hours in the morning, how many kids are being driven to school? And as a percentage of seats in our buses, are we down to 20% seating? The lines are pretty much back to Route 20. They're down the street to the apartments. I understand that we have to provide busing. I knew the answer to that. We are putting more buses on the road than we need. We are therefore spending more money on diesel, assuming they're diesel, than we need. Parents are not going to go back to putting their kids on the buses, at least for the foreseeable future. It's a large percentage of our budget, our education budget, for energy. I know we're not buying another bus, but buses are driving around empty. We're going to need to replace them because they're going to have so many miles. Is there anything that we can do as a town to somehow get parents to say, I'm not going to put my child on the bus so I don't have to be there? I would like to say before I leave and before you answer that question, we have great kids in this town. Luann and I have watched the theater presentations in this high school since we were allowed to go back through here after COVID. These are great kids. everybody should be required to come and watch these kids. They are smart, they're quick, they're great kids. These are tremendous groups of young children. And we should be proud of all the kids that put these performances on and these kids that are going off to do wonderful things in this town. We have great police officers in this town. I haven't been arrested recently, so I can't speak to that, but I've had to talk with any number of them, or had the pleasure of talking to them. That's not my question as to whether or not we should have another officer. These guys and these women are doing great jobs. Thank you for the answer.
Sure. In regard to the busing, we have another year left on our current busing contract. Granby currently owns their own buses, and there's a lot of discussions going on right now in our finance subcommittee as to whether this is the best model for Granby, and if there's an opportunity for us, once our bus contract is over, and it's a company we hire that basically drives and maintains our buses. And the question is whether there's an opportunity for us to explore cost savings through alternative methods. So yes, that is an opportunity that we see coming in the future, and one that we will be actively working on. As a side note, and as a mom as well of two little kids, I'm very familiar with this problem in regard to the buses, and I know that ridership is down. So we will be evaluating our routes as well to see if there's any opportunities for us to consolidate routes prior to the time where we have to renegotiate any contracts or explore different avenues for transportation for our kids.
Thank you, Monica. Anyone else please?
Tony King, Donahue Road. I have a couple of questions for the BOE. And Mike, you say this every year about special ed, and I don't understand the special ed, the state reimbursement of special ed. Why is it not predictable? Even when they say what it's going to be, they never make the target. I think you've gone over this years past. That's my first question.
Let me take a minute first. Part of it for you, well, how it works for the very expensive cases, the town is responsible for 4.5 times the average cost of a student, which is $20,000 and change, so that gets you to $93,000. Over and above that, the state is supposed to reimburse everything.
Yeah.
They, for quite a while, were reimbursing us of that everything over. It should be then 100% of everything over, at about 75%. 2 years ago, they passed a law increasing us. There's tiers of what reimbursement level you're supposed to be at. We're supposed to be at 88. Instead, we are currently, as of last week, at 59% of what we're supposed to get. We're going to get a bit more because recently they approved $40 million that goes into the kitty, and that will move us up by like 10-12%, something like that. I think it was intended to get us from 62 up to 75, but
so it's a moving target.
It's a moving target, and they're not putting enough in. The governor's budget for this upcoming year does not increase the pool, so we'll actually get less unless the legislature deals with it, which they probably will. The governor's second year of his 2-year budget does add $40 million, but that doesn't do us any good for fiscal 26.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, I understand the need for special ed and I support it, but I have trouble with this variable rate or budget or whatever. I have So thank you for answering my question. The other question I just want to point out, and I don't know that, I know I've heard it in some of the workshop meetings that I've attended. There was mention about the teacher salaries, and I will say that as a proud parent who had 2 children graduate from Granby High School, from Granby schools, that the schools, I was very pleased with the school system and everything that's been done. They've been gone for years now, so. And I do recognize my responsibility as a taxpayer, that when I sent my kids to school, I didn't pay for their tuition in my taxes in total every year that they were in school, that it's a span of time, pretty much my lifetime, I hope. And I wanted to point out that you didn't mention, and this isn't a criticism, but I know in the workshop there was talk about the teachers' salaries in this town. And we're pretty close, Superintendent Burke, I think that's for you, but we're pretty close to the bottom. And I am, for the long term, I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, that's true. It's absolutely true. After renegotiated contracts and that have been going on in the last year, we are second to last to Hartford So you are correct. So does something have to be done long-term to plan for this? Yeah, I think something does.
On behalf of all the parents with children in school today, I hope so. Thank you. And I just want to mention on a side, Chief Sansone, I have personally felt the results of your efforts here in town. I really thank you very much for coming to Granby. Thank you all.
Am I allowed to address the special ed thing real quick?
Yes.
Just so, thank you. You can go sit down. I can talk. You don't have to stand there. But I wanted to address in regard to the special ed because it is a moving target. And it's something that we all wish we could get 100% reimbursement on. It would make all of our lives much easier if we could. But Superintendent Burke and her staff have really come up with a variety of programs that are saving the town millions of dollars. We would be asking for substantially more money if these programs weren't being developed. And there are currently a variety of programs. We've discussed them in depth at various meetings, so I won't go into it. But I am going to highlight one particular, the Bears Academy, which is the law requires us to continue to teaching students for up to 22 based on a variety of needs. And the Bears Academy is a program that's operated out of the YMCA. And we have students that attend there now. We have magnificent teachers. The kids are doing great. I think one of our board members bought a plant from one of the Bears Academy students last week at the YMCA. And that program itself is expanding. It's an opportunity for students from other towns to come in and join our program for us to potentially generate revenue. And while we know that that's not our primary function, we are actively providing this service. So the real opportunity for us on the Board of Education side is for us to plan programs in-house. And that's what's going to save us money on special ed. And on top of that benefit, not only are we developing programs in-house, we're keeping our kids here in town with their friends, with their neighbors, and that's what we want to see. So that is definitely a goal of ours. It's something that Superintendent Burke has been actively developing. We're very proud of that, and we hope to continue doing more of that, and it's a win-win situation.
Anyone else from the floor? Going once, going twice. We'll move to anyone on Zoom.
Beth Carroll, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and address.
Hello there. My name is Beth Carroll, and I live at 10 Quail Lane. I will be brief here, but thank you for letting me ask I just have one comment and 2 questions. First of all, thank you everyone for a very professional and well-spoken assessment and presentation here today. Since I'm on the Zoom version of this call, I see that some of our state representatives are on the call as well, and I'm sure they can hopefully take our concerns back to the state legislature when it comes to things like this gap with the special educational costs and the changes that you so precisely described of how we were in the hole by $500,000 before we even started. And I would like to commend the article in the newspaper. I read the Granby Journal. To Michael Barco, I love your article, especially the one in March where you described it effectively, and that's the first time I actually understood what the state had done last year, and I loved it that you said these are all reminiscent of Tammany Hall, which I found especially interesting. And for the people in the school side of it, if people in the room don't know what Tammany Hall is, it might be a good thing to bring up in some capacity during history class. Having said that, I think my real question here is with the annual use of the general fund, and I see, and you explained why we're doing the same amount this year as we did last year, but when you take that out, my question is that excess over the 15% reserve? So if we're transferring $2.1585 million, does that mean that's still giving us the 15% you like to keep in the reserve fund? And secondarily, it's mentioned in these articles that if it goes, I guess I'm trying to understand, am I just kicking the can down the road in terms of an increase? Because if you're not going to use that much out of the reserves next year, you did say that anticipated annual reductions should be offset by introducing like amounts into the mill rate over time. So we may be keeping the rate to a regular level this year, but we can anticipate that the offset going forward will cause us incremental rates by doing so. I hope I've explained my questions.
Oh, yes.
But thank you.
So the 2185 is over and above the 15%, I believe. And we would look on the worksheet that we're using, we're looking to reduce the draw from the general fund by roughly $300,000 a year, which is just about 0.75% in tax. We project, as an example, on the worksheet using 3% operating budgets going forward and a slight increase over time in small capital, the infrastructure expenditure line, that the mill rate change will be it'll be around 3% or slightly over, which part of it is funded through, we're not really anticipating additional money from the state, but we do anticipate some growth in the grand list next year over 1%. But you still have to, you have the growth in the list that gives you a certain amount of money, and then you have the increase in the rate, and the rate only applies to real estate and business property, because on the vehicles, it's capped at the 32.46. So one way or the other, we will reduce the draw, and we will incorporate it within the mill rate, but the intent would be to keep the mill rate, what we hope would be tolerable and approvable by the public, because ultimately it's the voters who decide. The recent budgets have gone through basically roughly 55, 45, high 50s. I don't there's probably some that are 60-40. Obviously, we're in rather uncertain times these days, but with inflation where it's been, you see the impact of the contracts. The contracts for the next few years are all in the 3 to 4% range, including steps. And they represent the bulk of both budgets. We were fortunate this year that the health insurance number was not bad. It was a 2.9% increase, but last year's, I think, was what, 19%, significant. So it's a balancing act, and we come back to my last slide, striking the balance. That's what we look to do, because all of our properties here, whether we live in them, I have some rentals as well. It's an expense on one hand, it's an investment on the other. And putting too little in is not good, and spending too much on it is not good. And it's striking that balance. For those of us with kids in the system, 2 on my board have children in the system, 2 of us have grandkids in the system, and the other 2 used to sit on the BOE, so they understand the value of education. And you heard the discussion tonight on the mandate issues, how it hits education, hits the municipal side, and the things they do at the state level that sound good, but cost the towns money. And in a sense, they're one-shot hits, because once we adjust this year's budget to it, as long as the impact's no different next year, it's built in. But still, it gets where you're balancing off the holes in the revenues that Mark talked about with what we think we should approve as a town for municipal and educational services and capital. And that's the balance that we look to strike, and hopefully we have. In this particular instance, there's a heavy draw from general fund in the current year because of the size of the budget request last year. We increased the draw significantly. We went from roughly $500,000 up to the 2.185. We decided to hold it at that this year, even though we expected to drop it by 300,000 or so. A long run, we feel it's got to come down. It's got to get down closer to $1 million a year, which tends to be a conservative estimate of what goes into the general fund from the conservative budgeting, unanticipated revenues, and lapsed expenditures, the monies that the boards at the end of the year don't spend and turn back. We can't design budgets that are close to being really balanced without some elements of conservatism, because anything happens, you're running either to the general fund or you're having to restrict what you are looking to do. And at times that happens. And usually, the last decade or so, it's been a special ed issue. But oftentimes we're able to, at the end of the year, have money fall back and actually move money also into the capital reserves, because sooner or later, we're going to have to tackle capital. And that's all in the planning. You saw 3 years on the slide I put up in the book. There's a worksheet that's got 3 years prior. It's got 26 and then 3 years going out. And that gives you an indication of what we think that you're looking at. And it's the variances from that have put pressure on those numbers and that we have to adjust to as we're building these budgets and looking at the balance between what we want to do, what's it going to cost, and what's the impact on the tax bill. I've said enough. Beth, hopefully I more than answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Take care. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. With that, I will close this hearing. Thank you all for coming. It's your decision in 2 weeks out. The polls at Town Hall will be open 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Thank you all.